So, all right. So here we are. Blind Ambition with Christoph Fleischmann. So we're honored to have somebody from Europe, because you're in from what? Germany, from Munich?
Austria right now.
Austria.
Austria.
So that's Europe, right? Austria, if I'm not mistaken, because Americans aren't too keen on knowing what goes on in the rest of the world.
It is. Back in the middle of Europe.
Yes, yes. So maybe, Christoph, you could kind of lead off and just tell a little bit about yourself and tell about Arthur. And we'd love to hear your kind of career story.
Absolutely. So I'm the founder and CEO of Arthur. We built an extended reality or mixed reality collaboration platform for the enterprise. So you can think of it as a video conference just in 3D. So we use virtual reality headsets, and we're going to use all of the pretty exciting headsets that are going to come our way in the next 1 or 2 years as well, to bring people into the same digital space to work there together and enjoy meeting as if they're in the same space physically. Just everything is going to be fully digital. Sometimes we get likened to the enterprise matrix, if you want to call it this way.
So I'm curious because, you had the inspiration to name the company Arthur after King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. Can you walk us through that inspiration there? Are you just big myth fans, or what's the story there?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, like in middle school, I really loved these tales of knights, and I love this idea that there was this point where everybody would come together and discuss the round table. And that stuck a little bit with me. The actual naming Arthur was when we were really just kicking this idea off. We were like, okay, we need to give this a name. And we actually tried to make a wordplay with AR, because we thought about augmented reality, something really relevant for our company. And so we were like, AR, Arthur, King Arthur, Knights of the Round Table. And a lot of our folks from the early team, they're huge fans of also Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction author. So it was kind of, AR, then this concept of coming together at the round table, plus Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction author, who has pretty much described what we're doing already, decades ago. And so all this came together, and we initially thought this is just going to be the code name, but it stuck with us, and we really like the name, actually, because it sticks with you.
So I read your background. You're a serial entrepreneur specializing in virtual reality. And so we certainly have heard of augmented reality, virtual reality, the metaverse very recently. But you've been there since the early days. How has the industry changed over time, and what gave you the idea to start Arthur?
Yeah, I think, to be fair, the early days of VR probably go back to a time before I was born. Like there are some folks who were there in the 80s or 90s. Sometimes I meet some really inspirational people that show me pictures of, 1990s virtual reality headsets. So I think I joined the industry in 2013. So I had another startup. Back then we called it big data. It would be probably a machine learning startup, you would call it. Nowadays, what we did around 2011, 2012. But I was first really introduced in 2013, which was still for this current technological wave, very, very early. This was before a lot of the things around Oculus were happening, and pretty much no consumer-ready VR headset was available on the market. And for me, it was really, really interesting, because I was working at this AR company, augmented reality, and personally, I always wanted to always wanted to live in a world where geography didn't matter so much. So I come from the south of Austria, and if you grow up there and you're interested in tech, it's really difficult to find other people physically close to you that also like and enjoy tech, at least when I, 10, 15 years ago, when I was in middle school or so. And so for me, having this moment where I would this team put on a an AR headset on my head, and I saw just a little tiny hologram in front of me in 3D. I was like, wow, okay, that's kind of this technology that can deliver on a promise the internet has always given us, this promise that physical distance doesn't matter anymore. And I think it's an important topic to work on, because I think right now, still with all of the amazing tech we have available, distance really still matters. Your location still matters, and where you grow up still matters a lot. And I truly believe that augmented and virtual reality can change this. This is the type of technology that is so intense, so immersive, that you really don't need to travel physically anymore for, at the very least, work, but also in many other areas of your life, you will not be confined by physical distance.
Rick, right? We spoke to guests who we talked about that, where they may have grown up in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, or moved there really just happenstance. And it almost, I don't want to say it's an unfair advantage, but by being in that ecosystem early on, you get all the connections, you meet the right people, you have the networking effect. And I could appreciate how challenged that may be. Here's a young man who's like, hey, you get smitten, you get bitten by, like, you put on the glasses, you're like, hey, I want to do this. And you look around, well, there's no one here to like share it with you. There's no one there to mentor you, and you have to kind of figure out all yourself. And this is like a crazy career arc. So it's almost like you're now building the bridge for people like you who are saying, hey, you could join us. You don't have to live in a certain area to make this work. We're going to give you this new reality that you could join no matter where you are in the world.
Definitely. Yeah, I think for us, and there is just, it's not that it's something, actively evil, or like the Silicon Valley is amazing. Everybody there just wants to help other people, but it is very, very difficult to be part of it. Like, I know that in the early days of Arthur, and even in the years before Arthur, we did travel there a lot to at least have some connection to this space. And I was working with a partner company. There was a few years before I actually founded Arthur. It was also a virtual reality startup, and the founding team wanted to connect with investors and raise money. One of the first meetings was like, guys, tourists don't raise money. Like, it was clear that they weren't from there, and it was fairly clear that either make the move, go there, physically be there and be part of the group, enter it, or otherwise figure out some other way. And I don't think it's I think it's pretty natural. It's just everybody has opportunity costs with meeting other people, and there is something to this condensed, this compressed amount of people in one space that are super smart and super ambitious. There's something beautiful about it. But at the same time, how will this look in 10, 15 years? Can we, or already in 5 years, can we not recreate this incredible amount, this density of incredible people and talent digitally in a space that is as meaningful as the Silicon Valley physically feels like? And I think that's a lot what the vision that drives our team and myself, that it's, it feels like we're still a bit stuck watching the digital world. We're watching a video conference. I'm looking at through windows to the digital world. And this is not the case when I use VR or AR. I'm actually part of it. And this difference that I'm actually part of this digital experience, I think, gives us the power to overcome then the few things that, no matter how much innovation we put into flat computing, we just don't seem to really get there. I think, did I read it correctly? I think today Tesla said, look, come back to the office. We want to have you physically again there. And I think it just shows us that we don't yet have the tools to truly overcome geography or physical distance.
See, not to go off topic, but I was talking to Rick yesterday. We should have emergency podcasts to talk about like that. Elon Musk all of a sudden saying, hey, I forgot some of the quotes, but they were brilliant. Like, hey, go pretend to work somewhere else if you're not going to come here and work at least 40 hours a day.
That was pretty brutal.
Right? And just not to go off topic here, but do you think that's because he used his Tesla stock as collateral basically to do the Twitter deal? And now Tesla stock is getting crushed and he's freaking out?
I don't know. Like, if, to read Elon's mind is, I think, it's a dream. I don't know what's going on in there. I could definitely see that this is a driving force, but at the same time, I think he has been pretty consistently. He always encouraged a very hardworking work atmosphere and a very ambitious one. And I think he generally isn't happy about the result with everyone working from home, because he doesn't feel like he can connect to the folks from his company, and he doesn't feel like the productivity is up. And so the logical, it's not only Tesla that is doing it, right? Like, I think Apple announced it a couple of weeks back that they want to have people come back to the office. Those are highly innovative companies. That those are not the industrial 200-year-old companies we're talking about that are sending people back to the office. So I think it's a true topic that needs a lot of smart people working on it. I would encourage everyone listening to this to, take a look at these technologies and, potentially pursue a career path, because it's this incredible opportunity where we're now on the verge of seeing these use cases and application areas really explode in VR and AR, and this topic of hybrid work is one of them where it truly can shine. And I think for the better for everyone involved, employers, employees, everyone, the environment.
Christoph, so how did you make that pivot to say, okay, Austria, and I always want to say Australia, so that I know Australia is not in Europe, as if I recall. So like you're in Austria, and you decide, okay, I'm going to build this, and you're not really a software engineer. So for the people I'm blind who are like, hey, I'm looking to do a startup, I think you could kind of say, hey, I didn't, or are you? Did you have some software engineering background, or you just said, hey, I want to do this, and I'm going to make this happen by sheer will and force?
Yeah, I think the amount of rules for startups that we broke is ridiculous. And I think they make sense because there's a playbook, and if you repeat it, you have the highest chances. So we may have been just a lot more lucky than others. I personally, I did a lot of coding personally, and in my last startup and pretty much every project I was involved in, I was definitely technically hands-on. But you're right, I never had a job as a software engineer. I actually didn't study computer science. But I'm
you self-taught? Did you just teach yourself?
Yeah, self-taught, or in some courses that are available, obviously, or with basically pair programming with other people who are excited about the technology. So my brother was a huge influence. I mean, so he comes more from the actually hacking area of software development. So he loves to break into systems and find weaknesses, but you actually need to understand code really, really well to find this. And I don't know, he was teaching me to break into stuff when I was like 12 or 13 years old. And thank God back then it was a bit more, the damage you could also do was A little bit less, I would say, because I don't know what kind of an electrical grid he would have shut down if we were that age now.
Wait,
This
just out of
time.
curiosity, where's your brother now? Like, is he still in that space, or
Yeah,
or is
he
he
runs
or is he in
an IT
jail?
security. No, he runs an IT security company, very successfully. They're like some of the largest companies in Europe asked them to investigate breaches, and they also have a product. So he stayed fully in this space as well.
Just out of curiosity, were your parents involved with tech at all, or?
Not at all, no. Our parents were just of the opinion that this is something that they should give their children access to as much as possible. So I really don't think either of my parents are really tech heavy. I regularly get calls from them about, hey, can you help me with that on my iPhone or on my new Mac? My father is a doctor, and my mom also studied medicine and worked in accounting. But yeah, they just said, look, we're going to give them Game Boys, and we're going to give them as soon as we can afford it and it's reasonable. We're going to give them their own PC back then. And they've really stuck to this. And I think it was a majorly good decision, if you ask me, because a lot of other friends of mine, they didn't have access to these tools, even though they had the means. The families had the means to give them. They were just afraid of this technology. And I think that's really something where you see a bit of different patterns. For us, we were fully immersed in this technology, and we were spending a lot of time. And both of us actually ended up doing our careers in there.
And so how did you get it jump started? So did you do the coding to start it, or you just put a team together? How did this all happen?
So with Author, we started Author out of kind of a group of folks that were already doing multiple startups. So we were initially a group of 5 to 10 people, both mixed software engineers and folks that would rather run the business side of things. And we started off with this group in 2013, and then we started the first startups. So the first couple of folks went there. We were actually doing also software engineering projects for other startups or even companies. So we're running a software house, if you want to call it this way. So, and then as time progressed, all of us wanted to eventually start our own company within this construct. And then Author was basically, 2016 was the point where it's like, okay, I was hoping to start Author since 2013, but 2013 was really too early to start up. And in 2016, I was like, okay, now is the time. We kind of finished all of the software projects where I was in the lead and said, okay, hey, folks, don't you guys want to sit at a table together and start this off? And that's pretty much what we did. So the initial thing, this construct where we started to work with other companies and startups to build software for them, that was also, I think that was also a wild ride, because there we started really with very, very little, with no funding, no, basically no experience for most of us. And it was just brute force trying to figure out how we actually get a company off the ground. And it were some of the most stressful months of all of our lives. And I'm really glad we did it. I'm not sure whether I would ever do this again to my mental state, to build this up from scratch with such ambitious goals and no capital and no access to folks, but to folks who have done it before. So I think I guess if there's a message here, if you really stay persistent long enough and you find a way to stay on this topic, you will eventually figure out a way to start your company and get in there. I do think there's a ton of other ways how to get into the space as well. If you're already a software engineer working at a big tech company or something like this, you might have actually a much faster start than us. we were a bit more brute force, I would say, but it was a lot of fun at the same time.
Can you walk us through? I don't want to say the low points, but when you're
Yeah.
hacking away and you're taking this brute force approach, and I'm sure at times it felt like things weren't working. How do you stay persistent? Like, what did you and your team do to kind of push through?
Yeah, it's the it's good to remember the highs
Okay.
because the lows are really, really low. The lows feel like, wow, what are you actually doing with your life right now? Everyone around you is following a career that actually makes sense, and you idiot think you're going to do this. Clearly, obviously, nothing is working. What you're doing. Why on earth are you working 100 hours on this if nothing is working there, and everything is seemingly taking a turn to the worst? In these moments, it's good to then remember that you don't need that many. Well, if you want to think in a framework that as an entrepreneur, it's a constant stream of everybody telling you no, not because they don't like you, just because it's normal. Like your product isn't there yet, maybe the market isn't there yet, maybe the investors aren't there yet. So it's everyone basically constantly telling you no, 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 no. So you always ask, but you always get no. I think the exciting thing is you don't need that many yeses to be successful. You need maybe just one great person that joins your team. Maybe just one investor who really believes in you. Maybe just one client who buys a bunch of licenses from you and finances you for 6 months. So quantitatively, I'm still getting the whole day just no's constantly, because otherwise we're otherwise not ambitious enough. But the few yeses you get in this job, they propel you forward. And the sum of these yeses, they outweigh all of these no's and all of the time invested. It then pays off. And I think that's a good mental state to be in. But I understand it's not easy to have this. And look, I think for myself, it was also a combination of insane luck and unbelievable privilege to even try this. And I think we have to be straight about this. It's not, I think very, very few people are truly self-made. And we put in an insane amount of effort into it and we powered through it. But, I had family and I had friends where I knew, okay, there is a network of support. There are people who believe in you, and that made it easier. Didn't have many liabilities or any other ways that would limit me. And so I think that made definitely my journey a lot easier.
I'm glad you brought that. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rick.
Oh, sorry. You mentioned in the early days, you felt like a tourist when you came to Silicon Valley, and
Yeah.
you were desperately trying to build that network. How did that network evolve or come over time?
I think the bad news is not only did we may have felt less as tourists than we actually were considered to be tourists. We thought we're a startup, tech is global, we're part of this group. Everyone was like, yeah, not fully. You're not really from here. You don't know anyone. How do we know whether you're serious about this? I think what really was, it's again, you get a lot of no's, and a couple people who sit down with coffee for coffee with you, and a couple people that then listen to your story and then actually make another introduction. And this is suddenly you get this social network that you have there, where hey, I knew this guy or this person, they introduced me. And this is how you slowly build it up. For us, a pivotal point was an accelerator program, really, that was then actually physically in the US. So as ironic as it is, we're building a company that wants to abolish the need to travel anywhere. For us, we got into the accelerator program, Boost VC, which I, by the way, highly recommend. It's run by Adam Draper, the son of Tim Draper, and the amount of positivity and great feedback you get in there that's the kind of stuff that also brings you through the hard times, investors like that. And so for us, it was actually then being there. That was a pivotal point. So we were able to build a small network before that, and then we got into this accelerator program. And from then on, yeah, I do think now, before the pandemic, I would spend probably a third or even half my time in the US and the Valley. So we were definitely very much there. But at the same time now, over the last 2 years, it did change a little bit. So it's the entire system. So some are arguing now it's coming back and everybody's flocking back into San Francisco and physically into this location. But the last 2 years, it didn't feel like you were missing out if you weren't there, I would say.
Yeah.
Christopher, being in the accelerator program, did they also fund you in that group, and then introduce you to other investors as well?
Yeah, exactly. They give you some funding, tons of advice, and a great network of investors to connect with.
And does it have this like flywheel perspective? Is that then because you get that good housekeeping seal of approval, because the Draper family have been in VC forever, so that they feel, oh, okay, if they gave him money and they gave him a chance, there must be something to it. So then it becomes easier if you want to raise capital to go to other investors because you already have that behind you.
Definitely. It's again, you don't need 100 people who are your supporters. You maybe just need 5, but they better be great. And this gets you to the next 10, and this gets you to the next 20. And that's how your network grows and your influence grows.
And for so then how did you get from there? So is it then constant? Is it you're focused more on building, your product, or are you focusing a lot on just getting more money to keep growing, or you have to do everything all at once?
Yeah, it's a bit of a dance, I would say. You always want to, unless you're in a really great financial situation as a startup, which at the early days you almost never really have, because you don't yet have a product. You should, I think it's good advice to always be talking to investors, even though it's really going to be super hard to convince anybody to write a check. You should always be talking, should always keep updating folks about your progress. I think it's a good idea. It's annoying because everybody would like to spend more time with your clients and your product, but it's part of your job to make sure that when you hit a moment where you really have something valuable and you bring this to a great person, they might already know you, they may have already tracked your progress, and this builds a lot of credibility. So I do think you should pretty much always spend some time on fundraising, particularly if you're the CEO of your startup. Now, for all the other 70 hours you have in the week or so, or if you can pick how much you spend, I think you can also build a startup with less. I think for us it was quite intense. For all the other hours you have available in the week, you just need to crazily obsess about your product and the first couple users. Because again, the majority of people will say, no, I don't want to deal with it. But it will basically give you these no's. But hey, your first user, you should build them a shrine, therefore your product is probably pretty crap, because it's so hard to build a product that is even just decent, right? Let alone a good product. And it takes so much money and so much time. The first people who talk to you, they are enduring something that's pretty bad, and they're giving you feedback. And so you better listen to every single move they make and every single word they say, because that is the kind of, you know, currency that allows you to, that's the resources that allows you to build a better product. It's a fundamental thing. It's not just throwing lines of code into the World Wide Web there. It's about sometimes only a few lines of code, but you need to know which lines of code and which things you actually need to build, and your users will tell you this story.
You know, it's so interesting because, you know, in a different line of work, running a search firm, early on, I got used to hearing no, because most people, you hear no, no, thank you, a phone slamming down, and it just completely breaks you apart. Like, you know, you go into fetal position. Oh my God. But the weird thing is, after a while, you realize, oh, okay, it's almost like a game. It becomes like a large numbers game. And there's this kind of, I don't want to say a joke, but kind of a cliche within recruiting, but I imagine in sales too. The more no's you get, the closer you get to a yes, which is one part trying to put a positive mental spin on it. The other part is just the law of large numbers, that if you keep asking, eventually someone's going to give you that yes. Like you'll get, you know, that Draper Accelerator program, you get that yes, you get that first check, you get that yes, and that fuels you to get more no's and more no's to get back to that yes. You just have to be able to endure that punishment while you're going through it and get that dopamine hit. And then that dopamine hit carries you further, you know what I mean? And hopefully it gives you enough of a hit to get to that next level. And then you just keep repeating it.
You are actually saying what I was about to say, because I think successful founders, we as a society, we look at them, and what we're looking at is we're looking at addicts. You know, you're chasing this next high, and it really doesn't matter how hard it is to get to this next high, which is this yes or this deal or whatever it is. You really become addicted to it. And for me, it's you know, it's in terms of how I thought about this is, just as you said, it's, you need to take it, if you can, with this little bit of, you know, self-irony and not taking yourself too serious. You know, like, I think there's a wrong understanding of risk in this world. Like, you don't risk that much by starting a startup. You know, you will probably learn so much, you're more valuable than before to any employee if you want to then go back to a company. Yes, you're risking your time and honestly also your reputation if you fail to a certain extent. Especially in Europe, there's still this mentality. It's still a pretty, I think it's a bigger
different,
deal
right?
than
Than here in the States.
If you fail. But I think that another thing that really brought me through a lot of the very difficult early times is, you know that everybody is in your line of work is going to have exactly the same experience. And if you read, for example, the book Founders at Work from Jessica Livingston, I think that I read that in the early 2010s. And everyone just has, like, everything reads like a thriller. It's never an easy ride where you just, you know, oh yeah, customer, and the ones who say the story probably don't tell you the truth. Everyone is, it's always a struggle, but for everyone. And if you're really competitive, you start developing this mindset that you almost enjoy the problems that come your way, because that's an opportunity to be better than someone else at solving this problem. Like, if you're in a line of work and you never have any problem, what are you spending your time on? That's something that really, maybe not everything here is, maybe a balanced approach is ultimately always what you should find. And maybe that's not the best mental health advice I'm giving about what kind of mindset you should develop. But I personally enjoy it if I realize something is incredibly difficult and there's a huge problem technically, or, you know, from a business perspective, still right now in our company, because I know there's nothing special about us. Everybody is having the same difficult experience. Everybody has the same difficult conditions that they work in. nobody has this easy ticket, no matter whether they have more funding or not. Like the fundamental laws of the startup universe are stacked against you. They want you to die, just like, you know, the fundamental laws of the real universe are difficult for life to exist. And for me, this idea that this is the chance to beat the entropy of the universe and be a little bit better than your competitors, and be a little bit better than the fundamental, or actually win over the fundamental laws of the system, that really drives you. And this, I think, creates this crazy high that you're then, wow, you actually succeeded somewhere, you actually closed the deal, you're actually getting this. And you start really loving this. And at one point you can just handle these tough times because you know there's going to be a good time as well, as long as you stay focused and persistent.
I think that crosses over all sectors, because I would bet you, Rick, can't wait to write some article about some crazy thing that happens, or maybe write about what we started talking about before the show with Elon Musk, in terms of saying, hey, get back to the office. I imagine, Rick, right? You probably get that highlight. I can't wait for that next juicy story I can write and share with the readers on Blind, right?
No, that's exactly right, where you're kind of figuring out like, hey, what is our unique take, and hopefully if I can get a scoop from our users, it's even better. You know, like Christoph, I'm really interested in what you're saying, because we often hear a lot from founders this very similar kind of like personality or background of this competitive nature, or this grit, or this ability to just take the no's and keep moving on. And I've noticed this trend in technology where you have a group of people, maybe they're used to being the smartest person in the room. They have gone through school, have done exactly what the teacher has told them, gotten the high marks on the tests and the exams, and they go into this world and they start to struggle, right? They read TechCrunch, they read the news, and they say, oh my gosh, well, this so-and-so company has raised so much more money, has hired a new executive. How do you reconcile that, or how do you help for other folks to reconcile that? Oh, you know, what am I, this almost imposter syndrome, right? Where I've been going through my life, just everyone's telling me you're doing great, you're doing great. I'm seeing other people do great, but I'm still getting the no's, right?
Yeah. Oh, and it's so real, imposter syndrome. and it can hit you anytime, at any stage of your company, I think, even if you don't expect it to hit you. For me, I do think what really helps is to be aware of critical thinking and mental biases, thinking biases. I think just reading a lot about how survivorship bias works is a shield that protects you as a founder. Because you never read about, oh yeah, company X or Y is, you know, you read about some companies shutting down or doing layoffs, but the majority of the subtle negative things that everybody endures, you don't read about. You only read about the crazy, the extreme events, the folks that raised at 100 times their revenue,
right?
Another round valuation, like, wow, why am I struggling here trying to raise 25x? What am I even doing? And then you should realize you're talking to investors about valuing your company at 25 times your revenue. Maybe that's not so bad, and maybe you shouldn't take a look at these extreme examples. One thing that really helps, I think, as well, is honestly, everything is kind of broken. Talk to anyone at the big tech companies. Like, it's not that there's this, you know, utopian perfect world of software development and product. Everything is so broken. All you have to do as a founder is run a company that is a little bit less broken than all the other ones. Like, and and this gives me also a lot of peace, because yeah, you're gonna feel like, what are you even doing here yourself as a founder? What is your team even doing here? Is anybody talking to the other person? Is anyone actually in sync with what the others are doing? But the reality is, this is just really freaking difficult what you're doing, and you're already working with probably super smart people, and there's only that much time in a day, and there are that many work streams, and that's why people will forget someone else in one work stream, and that's where things happen that will then look from a third person view like, oh wow, we're so badly managed, wow, this is going so horribly wrong. But it's just perfectly normal. And if you look at any big tech company, we'll probably see it 10 times worse, when $10 million gets spent on the wrong thing or something like this. It's just totally normal. So probably the average company operates at like 25% efficiency, and that's probably a high estimate. Maybe that's already the 90th percentile of companies, and there isn't anyone above 70. Maybe for a quarter you can be like a 50% efficient company, and I think this is, for me, is just something. If you read about other startups, if you talk to other startups, if you look at big tech companies and how they're managed, to realize that it's a bit like maybe TechCrunch is to startup founders what Instagram is to young kids trying to figure out their body image. Like it's not always the actual. A lot of it is real, but at the same time, unless you go out and see yourself how normal what you do actually is, and put it a bit in perspective, that just what you're doing is really, really difficult. And that's why it's okay to fail. It's okay to have problems. It's okay to have inefficiencies. I think this gives you then really peace of mind, as long as you also have these counter examples from others where it's not going well.
We're in a system that you see in the news constantly. And I tell myself this all the time, because you have to do this little, inner work and self-talk, is that because you're only going to see the winners as big successes. That's why they're in the news. That's why they're being highlighted. So then you start thinking, God, I'm such a loser. I'm not, why is this, like, what's going on? Then you have to recalibrate yourself. Oh, wait. You know what? They're there because right at this point of time, they're really hitting it and doing really well. And then how many times when they fail, okay, you get a big story about they fail, but then you never hear from them again. And then you hear another story of success, and to get you go through it again. Oh man, why are they doing this and I can't? So it takes a really strong, I think, mental mindset to be able to not compare yourself, because this is a big thing for anybody, not even in business, but not to compare yourself against someone else, because it could just eat away at you, where you look and say, oh, maybe your college roommate became, Elon Musk or Bill Gates. And you're like, how can I compare? Oh my God, I'm the biggest loser. But that person could still be like amazingly successful, but always comparing themselves to someone else, and they're miserable. And that's something I think we all have to work on, because it's easy to erode your self-confidence and self-esteem in the way things are set up.
And the other problem is that we are immediately updating our reference group. As soon as you hit one of these yeses, you don't consider yourself anymore as part of the pack of startups that was hoping for their, seed investment, for example. In the moment you have this, you're now looking at all the Series A and plus, Series A and beyond. So you're just mentally also, unless you, kind of yourself write it really down. Hey, for me, success is having a company with 30 full-time employees, having a Fortune 500 company as a client, raising a seed round from a great investor. I think it's good to write these things down, because you forget them so quickly that your previous self would have killed to have this. And you have it right now, and you're still being, it's good that you're chasing the next thing, but you shouldn't, become a slave to this mentality that you never that you're eternally dissatisfied, because that will drive you eventually to become bitter and probably make bad decisions for the company. So that's a little bit what I try to do, like be very precise about what I at each stage think is success, and then genuinely celebrate it if we reach it, and remind yourself that you've reached these goals. And yeah, obviously the sky's the limit, but it helps to self-reflect there a lot.
That's really smart. That's really insightful. Hey, Rick, I know you mentioned that a lot of people on Blind are always looking to, kind of maybe move from Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, startup. And tell me what you think. It seems like when Christoph tells his story, I think that gives fuel for people to say, wait a minute, he seems like a nice guy. He seems like a normal guy. And if he's doing it, why can't I? Do you think that would be kind of that push that maybe somebody needs to take that leap that was just kind of making excuses and not doing it?
You know what? I think so, right? Because on the blind community, you have such an ambitious group of technologists that they're always looking exactly, they're falling into this, I guess what Christoph is maybe calling like this Instagram TechCrunch trap, right? Where you could be at Amazon and make a record high total compensation package, but you look over and you think, oh wow, this Web3 thing is really kicking off. Should I become a blockchain developer? Should I start accepting my pay in a new token, right? Or some type of crypto? Almost like this fear of missing out, right?
Yeah.
It's so Christoph, I mean, you mentioned this a bit, but like, how would you recommend? Like, is there a recommendation that you have for folks to keep grounded and to kind of almost put on these blinders to avoid these distractions? Or how have you done it?
Yeah, it's tough because I guess you need to separate fear of missing out from ambition that is grounded in your belief that something matters. I think if you work at one of the big tech companies and you feel like you want to get into crypto, and you genuinely feel like this is not just because it's the 20th tweet that you read on the day from anyone analyzing why this cryptocurrency is going through the roof or something, like if you genuinely feel that you understand what this technology is and you want to be more involved in there, I think then make this jump, because life is at the end of the day pretty short, and you're probably really, really smart and in a great position to do this jump and to do something that if you don't succeed, then you might find something else that either makes you happy by pivoting or finding another startup where you want to, like, it's about creating opportunities to get lucky, right? That's I think a framework I try to use. Like how often in a month you even get the chance to be lucky, because we talked about you get a lot of no's, right? It's like always rolling a dice. But you can't control how likely it is that any single decision will turn out in your favor. Like the dice doesn't like you, it doesn't dislike you either, but it doesn't care about you. It lives independent of your emotions, or your actions. But what you can influence, what you can affect, is how often do you roll this dice. And I think that's something you can do. Like you can try to take decisions that allow you to at least try to get lucky more often, or successful, or reach something that is part of your goals. And I think that's something very separate from this fear of missing out, where you're actually maybe you're just in for it's I think it's such a good description, fear of missing out. I think good decisions don't come from fear. I think they come from excitement and this dopamine rush that Jack was talking about, that wow, I have this craving to get there. I think that's the kind of stuff how I would try to think.
love that focus on kind of first principles of being authentic and really understanding like what are your true motivations, right? Is it just you're chasing the latest fad, or is there something more deep, right?
Yeah.
That's there. I think that's also some just good advice for folks to have as a technologist, like to advance your career, right? Whether you
Yeah.
decide to start a startup or not, or decide to work at a big company, a startup, or anything in between, is really to kind of focus on like, okay, well, it's great that you have that ambition. Now let's aim it in the right direction, right? And
Yeah,
you have this like powerful thing on your side. How do you make the most of it, right?
definitely. And look, I mean, it's it's always so easy in hindsight, to talk about
Sure.
these decisions and things you take. And I understand that sometimes you don't even know what you care about, but then go out there and try some things. It it when you have it. It's if you're not sure whether you actually care about a topic, you probably don't care about it yet, or you haven't found the right topic.
I love that. Thanks for that advice, Christoph, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, Christoph, that was great because I think you tapped in. Coming from an outsider perspective, it seems like the folks who are going to be watching this, listening to this, who were thinking of taking a shot, you come across as a person like, hey, if he could do it, because that's what happened to me actually, where I was thinking of going into recruiting, and I'll just kind of cut to the chase. And a friend of mine introduced me to somebody. I saw his shop, and it was like one of the largest search firms in New York at the time. And a great, gracious guy gave me the time of day. And he was just a very down-to-earth, regular guy. And I left thinking, hey, if he could do it, I could probably do it too. And right then and there, I decided, hey, I'm going to start my own company doing it. So I think people on Blind, hopefully they get that same feel where, I've been putting it off. I know I wanted to do it, but you know what? I'm sure Christoph's a bright guy, accomplished guy, but you know what? If he could do it and the way he walked it through it, you know what? Maybe this is the push I needed to make that move. So I hope it resonates with a lot of people who watch this. And it doesn't even have to be, a startup. It could just a new job,
Absolutely.
a new career, going back to school. It could be anything, taking on a new gig, just changing relationships. So, because and this is what's so great about, this kind of podcast, these conversations, because yes, it's geared a little bit more towards the tech, world, but it applies to everybody, all kind of, careers, jobs, walks of life. It really crosses over so that it has a lot of value for anybody who's thinking of making that move. I think you gave kind of a blueprint. Hey, here's what to expect. It's going to be messy. It's going to be scary at times. It's going to be frightening times. You're going to feel like you're a moron at times, but that's okay. If you have the passion, you believe in it, and you have the fortitude, and you could take no for an answer and take no and keep going, then, you'll be unstoppable. So I really appreciate your advice, my friend. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for setting this up.
Excellent.
Yeah, hope we could talk a little bit about at least my experience. Maybe someone else comes there and says, hey, it's actually a lot more dramatic or shiny or glamorous. I think, it's actually, ultimately, it's a job that you do and you pursue something that hopefully you really care about. And it helps to be at a reasonable distance from it and keep a level head about, hey, it's fine what you're doing. Everybody is in the same boat. Right? That's at least what helped me a lot.
That's great. That's great advice. And thank you so much for taking your time, Christoph. Excellent.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Jack.
Take care.
I'm so happy to have met you. Thank you so much, Christoph.
Likewise.
Bye.